Joe Rogan keeps claiming that his podcast with 11 million listeners is just conversations, but with such a large audience, he and Spotify can't just freely platform misinformation and expect no consequences. I'm Yoonj Kim, and this is MTV News Need to Know. On Sunday, Spotify CEO Daniel Ek published the platform's misinformation protocols, adding a content advisory for anything related to COVID-19. And this came after 270 doctors and scientists called on Spotify to develop a comprehensive policy prohibiting misinformation in response to recent episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience, with false claims about the vaccine and origins of the coronavirus. And artists including Neil Young and Joni Mitchell have even had their music removed from the platform in protest. The Joe Rogan Experience was the most listened to podcast on Spotify in 2020, and the average listener is 24 years old. And 2 episodes with COVID-19 misinformation had doctors calling him a menace to public health. In a response shared to Instagram on Sunday, Rogan claimed he's no medical expert and said he tries to correct himself when he's wrong. He said in part,
"The podcast started off as just f***ing around with my friends and having fun and talking. And then when it became popular, other people wanted to come on, and I was like, oh, it'd be cool to talk to that person."
But with his platform of 11 million viewers per episode, does he have a responsibility to get it right and do more than try to correct false claims about the pandemic? It's not hard to believe that many Americans question the medical industry to begin with. After all, it's largely to blame for the opioid epidemic, for example, which has killed countless people with hardly any accountability. And questioning systems in an educated way should be encouraged. And this is Rogan's whole premise too, but only sort of. Like in his response today, he admitted to not prepping himself before episodes and referred to the positions of scientific experts as opinions. And Rogan has sparked controversy before for laughing about sexual assault, repeatedly making transphobic comments, using the N-word, and platforming discredited figures. But nevertheless, Spotify made a reported $100 million podcast deal with him in May 2020. This time, most of the controversy was around 2 recent interviews where he interviewed doctors, cardiologist Peter McCullough and virologist Dr. Robert Malone. And in both of these episodes, the conversations included proven inaccuracies that Rogan allowed to be voiced unchecked. On an episode from December, McCullough falsely claimed the pandemic was planned and said that it seemed to be completely organized and intentional in order to create acceptance for and then promote mass vaccination. Despite McCullough giving no proof of these claims, Rogan did not challenge or provide a follow-up correction. And in another episode, Malone claimed a conspiracy at Pfizer, saying that a board member was also on the board of Reuters and suggested they manipulated favorable media coverage and mass formation psychosis over vaccines. And this has been debunked as untrue. But while Rogan has claimed that he tries to fix mistakes when they happen on his podcast, he has not specifically corrected these blatant falsehoods. And during their episode, the two also spent time complaining about Malone getting deplatformed from Twitter and LinkedIn over his comments, despite being a doctor. And it's fair to question social media bans. But many conservatives frame them as liberal attacks when in reality, Twitter has banned creators for arguably less harmful messages. Like when comedian Patty Harrison had her account banned for jokingly impersonating the Nilla Wafers account. There is a line between controversial content and professional discreditation. And for Malone and McCullough, they were shut down by the science community. And that's an important distinction, that they were not persecuted for their opinions, but respectively discredited by other medical professionals, citing peer-reviewed studies based on factual data. As neuroscientist Dr. Ben Ryan told the Rolling Stone, "People who don't have the scientific or medical background to recognize the things he's saying are not true and are unable to distinguish fact from fiction are going to believe what Malone is saying. And this is the biggest podcast in the world. And that's terrifying." Spotify has since removed over 40 previous episodes of Rogan's podcast without explanation, yet the company continues to host him. And in a time when hate speech and misinformation leads to real-life consequences, censorship is admittedly a slippery slope that tech platforms have to deal with. But the 270 doctors and healthcare professionals calling out Rogan's show weren't asking Spotify to censor or even delete his episodes. Instead, they wanted transparent policies around the spread of misinformation. And with millions of listeners per episode, Rogan's influence means he can't hide under the protection of his average guy persona anymore. He has become a source, whether he likes it or not. And as his platform, Spotify has an obligation to hold him accountable. And Rogan continues to downplay his influence, calling these episodes just conversations. But when you have such a large reach, neither Rogan nor Spotify can feign ignorance. I'm Yoonj Kim, and that's what you need to know.